we're done today.
So
in addition to our regular item. Okay, I'm going on mute now, right?
So could we start?
We're all ready, yes.
Okay, so Baruch Hashem, I'm happy when we have a big oilam. I'm happy when we have even a bigger oilam. But it's always a schus to be marbitz Torah. And sometimes when I give a shir to a small oilam, and people apologize because they know that sometimes I give a shir to thousands of people, and I say, Kol be asoro shchinto shario. Se pas para Kodesh Baruch Hu, pastes for me. Kodesh Baruch Hu leaves the heavens, and he comes to be with Tzayin Yidin, Asor mi Yisrael. So it's always a schus, Talmud Torah derabim. And the topic we've been discussing today is a marvelous choice for two reasons. First of all, we are approaching Chag Shavuos, Yom Kabbalah Torah. Is there any more appropriate sugya as a preparation to Kabbalah Torah than the sugya of Talmud and Maisa? Yiddishkeit, Yehadus, is based on two pillars. Talmud Torah v'asiyas HaMitzvos. What else is there? Talmud Torah and Kiyum HaMitzvos. And the other reason is, we learned last week, but to you it is Parshas HaShavua. Im b'chikoisei telechu v'mitzvosai tishmeru. Rashi writes, Im b'chikoisei telechu. Yochol kiyum ha-mitzvahs cannot be. Haloi kvar ne'emar es mitzvosai tishmeru. Shetiyu amelem b'toiro. Ve'es mitzvosai tishmeru. Havi amelem b'toiro al-manas lishmer u'lekayim. So I'm not very big into Ramozim and Gematrias, but I once said that Poshet Azach, Adam la'omol yulad, omol es Rosh Teves, lilmoid al menas lasos. So the question we deal today is a sugya in Kedusha Memomid Beis. Talmud Godel oy Maise Godel. And this was a question debated by two of the greatest Taron, Rav Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Karman says, Maise Godel. Rabbi Kiva says, Talmud Godel. Nanu kulam va'omru, Talmud Godel she'Talmud meive lidei Maise. And a fundamental question in this sugya, when people said, Nizraku mepiach avuro, Talmud Godel she'Talmud meive lidei Maise, was that to support Rav Tarfon's opinion? Or maybe rather Rabbi Kiva's opinion, or maybe a compromise. Achro Shlishis, a different opinion. Talmud or Maisa. So in yeshivas, the yeshivas and Meshgichim speak a lot about the virtue of Talmud Torah as an end to itself, not only as a means to an end. And the Beis Halevi has an Arichas Gedolah. And beyond doubt, of course, that is true. Torah Mekadeshes, Torah Metaheres. And learning just the Shem Talmud is Gevaldig. But in MITZVOS Talmud Torah, it is clear as daylight. It's not the sugya that we're oisik today. But Ikar MITZVOS Talmud Torah is Lodas es aderech melech bo ve'es amasa asher yasun. Like the Gemara says, Talmud Godel, Talmud meive lidei Maisa. So the Tarfon maintains, Maisa is greater than Talmud. Rabbi Kiva says Talmud is greater. Pashtus, Nanu kulam v'oimru, Talmud Godel she'Talmud meive lidei Maisa. And that is somewhat of a compromise, bringing together Rav Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva. In essence, Maise Godel. We're here to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Taryag Mitzvah Sheb'Torah. In practicality, Talmud Godel. Because without learning, you would never know how to be a good Jew. And Talmud Godel, so Talmud Mever de Mais is not only the halachas. It's not only without learning Torah, you won't know Hilchos Shabbos. And last week we have Oisik and Hilchos Natilas Yadayim and Hilchos Tefillah and Hilchos Hamozayim. It goes beyond that. Without learning, you won't be inspired. You won't know what the Mesilas Yeshorim is Pesach, the first Perek. The biur klal choyvas odom biyoylamoy. When Chazal say Talmud Godel, Talmud Mever de Mais, that includes Musar. It includes Chasidus. Mever de Mais is not only to know the halachas, it is to want to be Mekayim the mitzvahs. I once said, I like words. It was never as easy as it is today to be a Talmud Chacham. Really. It was never as easy as it is today to be a Talmud Chacham. You have Schottenstein, you have Metivta, you have an abundance of literature. And I'll tell you a secret. This is not a very positive aspect. I think it's a negative aspect. But every day, Jungelite writes Shabbos and Chuvas. 24-year-old younger man writes Chuvas, Ebenezer, Choshev Mishpat, and in reality, like Korah, V'lo Shona, V'lo Shemesh. But he has Oitzar Chachma, and he has, it's an embarrassment to say, but he has a guru, and he looks things up, and he writes Shabbos and Chuvas. Once Gedolei Yisrael wrote Shabbos and Chuvas. After 50 years, Mile Kreser B'Shas V'Poiskim, Omo, in Dalat Chalke Shechanuch, he writes Chuvas. It's a new phenomenon. So it's very easy today to write Chuvas and to write Sforim. It was never as easy as it is today to be a Talmud Chacham. It was never as hard as it is today to want to be a Talmud Chacham. And that's the big challenge we have with our kids, because they have so many distractions and so many temptations and so many ties, and everything is so accessible. We need tremendous yata d'shmaya to give our kids inspiration. So once every boy growing up in the shtetl wanted to be a Talmud Chacham, but it was so hard to get there. Today it's so easy to get there, relatively. But the problem is not many of our kids want to get there. So when Chazal say Talmud Godel Shetalmud Mever de Mais, it's not only learning the halachas to know how to be Mekayim mitzvahs. It is also learning to be inspired to want to be a tzaddik and to want to be Mekayim mitzvahs. So Talmud Godel Shetalmud Mever de Mais is not only Shulchan Aruch, it is Musar and Chasidus and Agadah and Kol Chelkei Torah. So in essence, Talmud Godel Shetalmud Mevi Lidei Maisa. And that's the sugya in Kiddushin of Men, which brings us to another sugya in Bava Kama Yud Zayin. Maybe we should have it on the screen. I don't control the screen. So do we start off with Kiddushin or with Bava Kama? Okay, we have Bava Kama.
Which one does the Rav want to start with?
I think we start off with Kiddushin. That's natural. V'nishul l'sheila azu b'fneihem. Talmud Godel Ma'aseh Godel. Reb Tarfon said Ma'aseh Godel. Reb Akiva says Talmud Godel. Nenu kulam v'oimrim. That's an interesting expression we don't find many times in Shas. Nizraku mepuach chavura. There was a big group of Talmidei Chachamim and Nizraku mepuach chavura. Talmud Godel shetalmud mever de Ma'aseh. It does not seem to be a third opinion. It doesn't make sense that the two Gedolei Ador were there, and everybody, if it would be a third opinion, Chazal would say, who said that? So this seems to be bringing together Rabbi Akiva and Reb Tarfon. So let's go over to Bava Kama. First Rashi here. Rashi in Kiddushin. Rashi, very interesting Rashi. When Rashi says, Talmud Godel.
Shrink a little bit so we can see the Rav on the screen, the video of the Rav. Yeah. Why aren't we seeing the backs of the Rav? I'm not sure. Okay, go ahead. Hold it.
Do you see me?
Yitzchak. Why don't we see him on the screen? Yes, we see you.
Okay, so Rashi, Talmud Godol. I think we need to scroll up. Here we are. Talmud Mever de Maisa, Nimzu Shneim B'Yodoi. Interesting Rashi. So Rashi seems to say, Toivem Hashnayim and Wachod. The reason Talmud Godel is 1 + 1 is 2. If you're only Isaac B'Maisen, you lose out Talmud Torah. If you're going to learn Torah, you're going to do the mitzvahs as well. So let's go over to Bava Kama now. Bava Kama Yud Zayin is sugya number 2, and Toises both in Kedushin and in Bava Kama discuss this sugya. TORAH Rabbanon. Kavod Oselo b'Moises Echeskel Melech Yehuda. Sheyatzel Lefnei Shloshim V'Shishu Elef Chalutzei Kotev. Chalutzei Kotev means people that were korea, and they exposed their shoulder. And the Mechem says, "Alo lefnei achavos ukein, elo shenichu sefer Torah mitosoi amru ki em zeh ma shekosav eseh." And the Gemara says, we do that today as well. And there's a lengthy discussion. At the end of the Gemara says, "Ibo is ema anu chename manchinan ki em lo amrinan." And Rabbi Babachona says, I was walking with Rabbi Yochanan and we were talking and learning. And then he went into the basic Kissa. And as he came out, I asked him a question. Loi poshet lan adam Moshe Yodai b'manach tefillin u'mavorach v'hod amaron afilu kiyam amrinan limeid lo amrinan. So we would put a sefer Torah on the mitzvah of a Talmud Chacham, and we would even say Kiyem ze mashekosa b'seh, but we won't say limeid ze mashekosa b'seh. And then the Gemara asks, "Vor mamar go to lamid Torah shetalmid mever de ma'aseh." So obviously, according to Rashi, ma'aseh is greater than limit, and if we say Kiyem, that's even greater than limit. The Gemara answers, "Ula migmar or la agmure." Rashi says, "Le migmar la atzmoi mase odif, aval agmure la achrine odif mimais." So Rashi says, yes, the Gemara Bava Kama coincides with the Maskon in Kedushin. Talmud Godel Shemet Talmud Mever de Maisa, which means, in essence, Maisa is greater. Practically, Talmud comes first. Maisa is greater, but Talmud comes first. And that is what they mean when they say Talmud Godel Shemet Talmud Mevi Lidei Maisa. However, to teach Torah to others is greater than Maisa. So let me just express my feeling. Limeid, la Gemura Lachrona is even greater. And why is that? Because that is the transmission of Torah to the next generation. And that is Kiyum HaTorah, Kilo Shochach Mepizar. And that tops everything. We are here, and the chiyuv of every generation is to pass on the torch that we received from our fathers and forefathers to the coming generations. So Rashi and Bava Kama says, Maisa Godel Metalmud. However, the Lamed Lacherim is greater than everything. Toises writes Punkt Verkehr, an opposite opinion. Talmud is greater than Maisa, but that is only when you learn for yourself. Teaching others, Maisa comes before teaching others. Let's go back to Masechet Bava Kama and have a look at Toises. And we find this pshat both in Toises in Kiddushin and in Bava Kama as well. But right now, we're in Bava Kama. So let's have a look at Bava Kama. So Toises brings Perashak into this. Limit TORAH maybe they mice. Perish bekindes alma masodif. Because Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says, contrary. In Kiddushin, the Gemara in Kiddushin says Talmud Godel, not Masa Godel. So, now we need to scroll down. Here we are. Perish bekindes alma masodif. Omer Rabbeinu Tam, and Tosis rejects Kosher Rabbeinu Tam. Adarabba, Mochadayit Beperkulation, Talmud Godel, Shetalmud Ma'ivah Demaisa. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, Nanu Kulam V'Oinu supports Rabbi Akiva. According to Rashi and Bava Kama, it supports Rabbi Tarfon. According to what I said, it brings together Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. But let's see Rabbeinu Tam's Pshat and Bava Kama. It's on our screen. Omer Rabbeinu Tam the Ucha Perusha. Omer Mar Shilmed Mever Demaisa. The Kivin Shon Omer Kiyam Arei Omer Omer Shilamad. Dilay Lomad Hayich Kiyam. Talmud Mever Demaisa. So if we say Kiyam, must be that he learned. He wouldn't learn. Lo Amoritz Chosid Lo Bo Yerechet. And then the Gemara is machalek between learning yourself and teaching others. Hale Gemara. Limit vade lo yamrina. Do vade odev shemei v'yisaram l'dei maisim kishabalando. Shiltes der Rabbi Chai Goen. And this is a new pshat. Lo yigoras kiyam amrina limit lo yamrina. Ela goras manach tefillin v'hoda amalon v'suloi. That's the end of the story in the Shabbos. And the Gemara asks, why did Rabbi Yochanan put on tefillin before answering the question of Rabbi Baba Chora? Doesn't that prove that Maisa Godel Metalmud? Why did he put on tefillin, and only then did he respond and answer Rabbi's question? If Talmud is bigger than Maisa, he should have first taught Torah and then put on tefillin. The Gemara answers, Ola Migmar Holy Agamora. The Ligman Afshay Limit Godor. Shemevir de Maisa. Agamora Rachelem, Loyodif. The Ficha Choyam and Yach Tfilin. And then he taught Rabbi Baba Chonam. So this is fascinating. Machlokes and Tosis. Whether teaching others is a bigger chiyuv than learning yourself. On one hand, as I explained just a moment ago, teaching others is Yesod HaYesodis and Kiyum HaTorah. It is only when Marbitz Torah feel a privilege and an obligation to teach, that is the only guarantee. That is the only way to keep Torah going, and that is the only guarantee. But according to the She'iltas, Tosis explains the opposite. Your learning is most important, because if a person doesn't learn, he would never know how to be Mekayem mitzvahs HaTorah. Teaching others is a mitzvah, but Maisa Godel Melelamed Li'achayrim. And that is a big chiddush. I want to ask a very fundamental question. In my Svarim, I wrote a lot about this. Everybody is familiar with the sugya oisik b'mitzvah potem and mitzvah. The source of the sugya is Sukkah Chofei, but it's brought many times in Shas and in the Poskim. Even oisik b'mitzvah kala potem and mitzvah chamura. Oisik b'mitzvah derabanan potem and mitzvah diurais. There is only one mitzvah to which this halacha doesn't apply. Which mitzvah is that? The greatest of all mitzvahs. And this is really a paradox. If a person learns Torah, it's a Gemara Moed Kotten Daftes, and in many other sources in the Shas, but primarily Moed Kotten Daftes. Kol mitzvah she'iev shal asoyser de'acherem doichet al Torah. You're learning Torah. Every day in the morning, we quote the first Mishnah in Masechet Bayah. Ele devoram she'odam oichel pereseh b'yoram. It's there, Kere Kem Tzvah Mabo. The Talmud Torah keneged kulam. It's the biggest mitzvah. and we just learned in Kiddushin. Talmud Godel Shavei V'dei Ma'aseh. So how is it that the greatest of all mitzvahs is pushed aside by the lesser of all mitzvahs? Talmud Torah is the only mitzvah to which Oisig mitzvah doesn't apply. You need to stop your learning to perform any mitzvah. In Megillah Davdalet, Mekan Samchu Shabbeisraeli Shemavatlan Talmud Torah V'boim Lishmoya Mikro Megillah. It's Dav Gimel on Megillah. Megillah is a mitzvah Rabbanan, overrides Talmud Torah. So why don't we say Oisig b'mitzvah potamah mitzvah? Could we have on our screen a Yerushalmi and Brochas Tav Chesed Medalef, fascinating Yerushalmi? If we could have Yerushalmi Brochas Chesed Medalef.
Now that Yerushalmi that we have in the package, Pesach. Yerushalmi we learned earlier.
What we have on the screen is the Gemara Megillah. If we could have Yerushalmi Brochas Ches Amud.
Pesach, we have Yerushalmi in the package. Just go to the. There we go. You had it. One before.
No, that was Psochim.
Oh, Psochim. Oh, okay. So what's the right side?
I don't know whether it's in the package.
No, we have to get it new. We got to give the Rav should give us the site. Ches
Amud Aleph. If we can get it, we don't need it. It just Oisius Machkimis. If we could have it, I think it would be beneficial. But if it's difficult, then I'll just quote to you what the Yerushalmi says. So the Yerushalmi brings the story of Reb Shimon bar Yochai that wasn't mevatel Talmud Torah even when Zman Tefillah came. And there's a machlokes Bavri and Yerushalmi. Okay, here we are. I think we have it. It's not Surah Sadaf. Okay, at the bottom of the page, we need to scroll down. Reb Yochanan b'shem Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Kigon onu she'oiskim b'Talmud Torah afilu l'kriyas Shema ein onu mafsikim. Reb Yochanan says, Reb Yochanan Omer al Garmei. Reb Yochanan says about himself, Kigon onu she'ein onu oiskim b'Talmud Torah. Afilu l'tfila onu mafsikim. Dein kedatei, v'dein kedatei. Let's scroll down to the bottom of the page. So Reb Shimon bar Yochai wasn't mevatel Torah even for Kriyas Shema. That's a machlokes. Bavli Shabbos Yudalef says, Kriyas Shema yes, however, Tefillah no. Now at the bottom of the page, V'loi moidei Reb Shimon bar Yochai haloimed al menas lasois. V'loi haloimed shaloi al menas lasois. Shaloimed shalo lasois, noyach loi shaloi nivro. V'yomer Reb Yochanan, haloimed shaloi lasois, noach lo ilu nehefcho, shilyato al panav, v'loi yotzer la'aviru oilo. So the Gemara says, if a person learns and he doesn't practice what he preaches, he learns and he's not Mekayim mitzvahs, his Torah is worth nothing. That's harsh language. And the Gemara answers, this Yerushalmi teaches us why we are mevatel Talmud Torah to perform any mitzvah. Because otherwise, you are loy mitzvah as lasos. In my Havana, the way I understand it, this Yerushalmi is the same as we learn in Kiddushin Sof Perek Kama, Talmud Godel Shemei V'ledei Ma'aseh. The importance and the centrality of Talmud Torah is because Talmud made V'ledei Ma'aseh. So how could Talmud push away Ma'aseh? How could Talmud override Ma'aseh? If the entire chashivas of Talmud Torah is Talmud Godel sheTalmud Mevi Lidei Ma'aseh. And this brings us to the Ari Yerushalmi that we had before on our screen, Psochim Chov Daled Amadalef. Yerushalmi is a story, a nice story, somewhat amusing. So Psochim Chov Daled Amadalef. Reb Avu Sholach leReb Chanina Berei Yiski B'Tveria. Rebbe Vo sent his son to learn in Tveria. Osen Amren Lei Gomel Hu Chesed. He heard rumors, people told him, oh, your son learns in the yeshiva in Tveria. What a wonderful young man he is. He volunteers in the Chevra Kedisha, and he does the Taharas, and he buries the dead. And you have such a great son. And he was appalled. And he writes a letter. So they didn't have WhatsApp, they didn't have email, they didn't have nothing, they didn't even have telegrams. But he writes a letter, and he writes 6 words. Hamibli ein kforim bekislin, shelachtich letveria. People die in Kislev. You might as well come home. I didn't send you to Tveria to volunteer to the Chevra Kedisha. I sent you to Tveria to learn Torah. Hamiblo ein kforim bekislin, shelachtich letveria, shekvar nimnu v'gamro, b'aliyas beis oris belud, shetalmed koidem lemaisa. So probably Aliyah's base Nitzo that we find in Bavli is the same as Aliyah's base Oris that we find in Yerushalmi. Both were in Lud. So it's probably the same story. Talmud Koidem Lamais. Rabbonin de Kislin Amrin Hadod Taima Bishiyasha Mishiyasa. Avalamein Shamishiyasa Maase Koidem. Dilma. You know what Dilma means in Yerushalmi? The word Dilma. In Bavli, it means Shema, Efshal. In Yerushalmi, the word Dilma means once upon a time. Once upon a time, Rav Chia, Rav Yossi, Rav Amy, Onum, Lemeisei, Gaber Rav Elazar. Omeloin, Ihavisun. So Rav Chia and Rav Yossi and Rav Eimer skipped a day in yeshiva. They didn't come to learn by Rav Elazar, their Rebbe. Omelon and Havesa, where were you? I was waiting for you. Omrele Gamal Chesed. There was a mace in town, and we took Orban. Gimanis Chasodim Shalemes. Omelein, Veloy Havet Tamon Churnin, weren't there other people? Omrele Mogor Hoyu. He was a ger. He had no family. There was no one to take care of him. A ger tzedek, so we did. So, you know, not many people are familiar with the Lashon of the Yerushalmi. It's a different sprach, it's a different Lashon. But let's come to the point. So, Rebbe was sent his son to learn. And his son was such a neshama, a Yiddish neshama, he volunteered to have a Kedusha. Rebbe was angry. And he said, I sent you to learn Torah, and don't look for MITZVOS. Why? Talmud Gadol. However, why is Talmud Gadol made of their mice? And the Gemara says, Im efshel mitzvahs yishut yoser de'acherem, ma'aseh doiche Talmud. And that's the Yerushalmi we just learned, the Masechet Brachos. So if there's no one else to do the mitzvah, you close your Gemara and you do the mitzvah. And that is the story of Talmidei Rebbe Elazar. He asked them, why did you come learn? You did chesed, Talmud Gadol. There was no one else. And if there's no one else, Maisa Koidem L'Talmud. Is there an afkamin el halacha? A clear an afkamin el halacha? There is. And this brings us to a Gemara in Megillah Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, a Sifet Shulchan Kuf Nun Gimel. There is no justification to set a Sefer Torah, only Lilmei Torah, Leliso Isha. So the Gemara says in Megillah Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, we have the Gemara, we can go to the Shulchan Aruch. We have the Shulchan Aruch.
No, the Gemara, we had the Gemara before in a separate...
Okay, the Gemara is great. The Gemara is great.
Yeah, right here.
Okay. So, on one hand, you can't sell a Sefer Torah to buy Svarim because Ma'alam HaKodesh V'lo Moridim. But on the other hand, that's the other section in the Gemara, the Omer Reb Yochanan Mishim Reb Meir, Ein Mochrim Sefer Torah L'Torah V'Leiso Isha. Shba'amana Torah v'Torah shapidami. Dilmei, shane limud, shetalmid mei v'lidei ma'isa. So the Gemara says, you cannot sell one Sefer Torah to buy another. Because Malam Kodesh, they're the same. So how could you sell a Torah to learn Torah? Limit Godel shalimud mei v'lidei ma'isa. So you could sell a Talmud Torah to learn. Why? Talmud Godel. Why is Talmud Godel? Mei v'lidei ma'isa. And that's Nifsak and Shulchan Aruch. And the Mishnah Berurah brings, you could sell a Sefer Torah to buy Gemaras. But that goes against the Gemara. You can't even sell a Sefer Torah to buy Tanakh. But if there's no other way to learn, then you sell a Sefer Torah to buy Gemaras. So Mochin Sefer Torah Lilmod Torah. Hainu Lesparnis Bereva. Kosev Oida Prima Godem Tzorachiyun. Mochin Sefer Torah Liknes Gemara V'Poiskim V'Perushayim. Du atam, der Mochin Sefer Torah V'Shul Limit, Mishim Limit Mai V'Dei Ma'isa. Im Kain, Hu Adin, Efshar, V'Chi Hai Gavin. So what we learn in Megillah of Zion, that you can't sell a Sefer Torah to buy even Tanakh, is when we have Sforim. But you have a new Kehillah. You have a Sefer Torah, but you don't have a Shas, you don't have a Shulchan Aruch. You don't have enough Sforim for people to learn. Prima Godim says, you could sell a Sefer Torah, buy Sforim, even though in the levels of Kedusha, it's Moridin. But how would we learn without Sforim? And therefore, Halacha L'Maisa, you could sell a Sefer Torah to buy Sforim. And now we go me'inyan le'inyan ba'oisayu inyan. A fascinating machlotes in Rishonim. Mipnei Sefer Tokum v'adartu pnei Zohar. Pshuto shel Mikra. You need to be Mechabed elders. Kiddushin daf lamed gimel amud beis. You sell a Sefer Torah to, no, not selling a Sefer Torah. Now we deal with the question, Mipnei Sefer Tokum, V'adatu pnei Zohar, Ze kono chochma. There is a mitzvah kima b'fnei talmidei chachamim.
Pesach lamed kedushin lamed gimel.
So you need to stand up for a tzaddik. Interesting. Not every tzaddik is a huge talmid chacham. So, okay. Iboy alehum. B'noi v'hu raboy, ma'u lamed mipnei oviv. The father is a father, but the son is the Rebbe of his father. I want to share with you a very personal experience. And I almost, tears swell in my eyes whenever I remember. My late father, Zechet Tzaddik Baruch Hu, was a tremendous Talmid Chacham, but for many years, he used to come to my shiurim. Both the shiur I said on my Bismedish Thursday night, the shiurim I used to say in Koilo, and he used to give me a hard time. No protection. He used to interject and shout in the middle of the shiur, kashas. When my father passed away, and people came to be Menachem Ovel, this was an experience so many people shared again and again and again. How moving it was to see a father sitting at his son's shiur, and the derech eretz that I had the zchus to demonstrate. On one hand, it's Talmud Torah. 200 people are sitting. I can't automatically agree with everything he says when I think he's not right. I need to teach Torah Semes. But on the other hand, the mitzvah of kibudah, I think I passed the test. I think it was very mechubed. And people will never forget the sight. So it's not exactly the boy in Kiddushin. No, I wasn't my father's Rebbe. I learned so much from my father, but in a way, he saw me as his Rebbe when he came to my shiur. So the Gemara is Masupik, who needs to stand up for who? Does the son stand up for his father because Kibud Avei? Does the father stand up for the son because he's his Rebbe? Halacha L'maisa, each has to stand up for the other. But let's see what the Gemara says. Iboyeru, b'noi v'uraboy, ma'olamit mipnei avi, toshama. Yom Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda shenana, kome kami avich. Rabbi Yehuda was the son of Rav Cheskio. And Shmuel was the Rabbi of Rabbi Yehuda. And he says, young Ilui, you need to stand up for your father. Even though Rabbi Yehuda was greater in Torah than his father. Not Cheskio, Rabbi Cheskel. The Gemara answers, no. Shani Rabbi Cheskel, the Baal Maisem Ave. The Afilu Shmuel Naba Makom Akami. Even the Rabbi of Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel, stood up for Rabbi Cheskel. Why? Rabbi Cheskel wasn't a great scholar, but he was a Baal Maisem. What do Chazal call a Baal Maisem? At the end of Masechet Soita, Chazal speak about the greatness of many Tanoim and Amoraim. Misha Meisa V'kiva Botla Torah, Botlo Chasidim, Botlo Hashagdonim, Misha Meisu Ben Azai V'ben Zoimo, Misha Meisa V'chanidim Ben Doisa, Botlo Bale Maisa. So let me tell you who was Reb Chanidim Ben Doisa. He was the Rebbe of Tkufas HaMishnah. In the entirety of Shas, Mishnayos, the Sefta, Bavli, Yerushalmi, there is not one halacha that we learn from Reb Chanina ben Doisa, not one. And I say this with all responsibility. There is not one halacha that Reb Chanina ben Doisa teaches us. The same goes to Reb Pinchas ben Yoya. Reb Pinchas ben Yoya is an exception. He teaches us a Hasidish halacha. Al yaharer odom b'yoyim v'yovel edei tumo b'layla. That's the only mamer of Reb Pinchas ben Yoya. Besides that, Reb Pinchas ben Yoya says, Malas HaKadusha, Malas HaAvoida. Zehiris, Rizus, Nekiyas, Prishus, Tahara, up to Chasidus and Ruach HaKodesh. Reb Chanina ben Doisa, not even that. There's no mamer of Reb Chanina ben Doisa. What do we know about Reb Chanina ben Doisa? His moifsin. He was a miracle worker, a wonder worker. You know, there was some Rebbeim, everybody spoke about their moifsin. Reb Chaim Kanevsky passed away not long ago, besides being a giant of Torah, Sara Torah. Stories were legendary. All we know about Reb Chanina ben Doisa, do you remember the Gemara in Tanis? His daughter wants to light Ner Shabbos and she breaks out crying. We have no shemen, it's vinegar. And Reb Chanina ben Doisa smiles at his daughter and he says, my dear daughter, don't worry. Misha Omer Shemen v'yadlik. Whenever I quote this story, I say, this Pilus is not about the moifis. He did moifsim every day. It's about the sprach, the simplicity. He doesn't meditate. He doesn't go into a room and scream and shout Rabbeinu Shalom like Chonya Magel that makes a circle in his hand and says, I'm not going to Nasub. He smiles at his door and he says, what's your problem? No problem at all. There was a terrible snake in a town and so many people died after being bitten and they couldn't catch that snake. What do? They bring Reb Chanina ben Doisa. He takes off his shoes, he takes off his socks, he puts his foot right at the pit of that snake, and sure as daylight, doesn't take a moment, the snake bites Reb Chanina ben Doisa. And the tzaddik just sits there, he's not worried at all, and the snake dies on the spot. And Reb Chanina ben Doisa has a sense of humor, and he says, Oila Adam shepoga b'yaroid, Oila aroid shepoga b'Reb Chanina ben Doisa. What else do we know about him? Koyach HaTfilah. He knew immediately whether his tefillah is miskaber or not. In tefillah shgura b'fi, harei miskaberes. I mean, tefillah shgura ain't miskaberes. That's in Brochus Lamed Dalet. And the Pcheninim and those was a Baal Ma'aseh. Now, I don't mean to say he wasn't a Lamdan. That's ridiculous. He was a Tana, like we have a Tanur. But for some reason, we know nothing about his life. Nothing is shared. So obviously, his importance, his status was not as a teacher of Torah for generations to come, but as a Baal Ma'aseh. So, do we need to stand up for a Baal Ma'aseh? It's not written in the Gemara. Only b'derech remes. Shmuel stood up for Rebbe Cheskel. He was a Baal Ma'aseh. It's a machlokes Ramban and Ram. And the Ram in this Kedushin Lamed Gimel brings a machlokes. The Ramban says, nowhere do we find that there's a chiyuv to stand up for a Baal Ma'aseh. It's not found anywhere. That's what the Ram brings from the Ramban. The Ram maintains a Ramban. Says there is no chiyuv to stand up for a Baal Ma'aseh. Ba'anan, last 3 lines, first paragraph. Anan lo ashkachem kima mepnei Baal Ma'aseh. Ela ein eloima she'ein boi mishum zuchem en aficha baydoi, because he was a Baal Ma'aseh. Okay. The Ran disagrees. Vein ze mukvar etzli. The Gemara hechekama. He quotes the Gemara, and he says the reason Rabbi Cheskel needs to, the reason Yehuda needs to stand up for his father, Baal Ma'aseh Mashma Vadai, the boy in Hainem Mishim de Mesat Koron, Kivin Shechai V'Torah Lokom Ebnei Chochem. How about Baal Ma'aseh? And the Ran says V'Rom Kal B'Chayma. Talmud Godel, Shetalmud Mevadei Ma'aseh. So obviously, Ma'aseh is more important than Talmud. And this is a machlokes, the TORAH and the Shulchan Aruch. The TORAH in simulation of Dalet Paskins, we need to stand up here. Mishu Chosadu Ba'Ma'aseh, Hakal Tzrichem Lamed B'Chona, Afiru HaGedolim Memenu B'Chochma Arba. Why is that? That's the svor of the Ran. Because Talmud Godel, Shetalmud Mevadei Ma'aseh, Ma'aseh Godel Min HaTalmud. The loss of the Shulchan Aruch is Afilu Mufrag B'Chochma, Rashai Lamoid B'fnei Mishu Baal Ma'aseh. It's a heter, not a chiyuv. That's the Ramban. That's the Ramban. Nowhere do we find a chiyuv. So this machlokes depends. Machlokes Rishonim Bava Kama Yud Zayin Kedusha Men. The Maskonas Advorim, is Talmud greater or is Ma'aseh greater? This is the Shosh machlokes. Now, Shulchan Aruch Paskins Rashai, both the Shach and the Taz and Shuvas Chasam Sofer we saw just a moment ago on the screen. Reish Lamed Gimel, they all paskin like the Ran and the Tur, Lo Kedi Shulchan Aruch, Taz, Shach, Sam Sofer, and many others. So why don't we find in the Gemara the halacha? So the Ran says, how would we know? You could know who's the God of the Torah. You could know who's the God of the Torah. Talk to him and learning. Listen to his shir. I almost said, learn his Sfarim. Today, I know some very famous Rabbanim who publish Sfarim. They don't even know what's in the Sefer. My father used to call it a minekes. They hire a minekes. My father had a sharp sense of humor. He was very sharp. I know some Rabbanim, they hire a younger man. They pay him well, and the younger man is happy to write Sfarim, writing tshuvas for others. But we know who are the great Talmidei Chacham. But how would you know who's a Baal Ma'aseh? Ki odam yireh le'einayim ve'elokim yireh le'leva. And that is why we don't find a halacha psuka that you need to stand up for a Baal Ma'aseh. But if you know, like Rabbi Cheskel in the Gemara in Kedushin, if somebody is muchzad b'tzik, and people know him for many years, we see him davening, we see his zehidus, we see his yiras shemayim, we see him davening every morning with the nates, we see him running with a minion. But there cannot be a halacha that you need to stand up for a Baal Maisa, because ultimately, only a Kodesh Baruch Hu really knows who are the tzaddik. So this sugya once again depends. Talmud Gadol, Masa Gadol. Let's finish today's shiur with just an interesting source. It's not so fundamental. Shalos Teshuvas Afar Kasta da Anya. I don't know whether we have it in our package. Who was the Afar Kasta da Anya? Reb David Sperber. He was one of the Gedolim in Romania, and in his later years, he came to live in Eretz Yisrael. Reb David Sperber was Megiddo Yerushalayim in his later years. He wrote a very big tshuva sefer, Afar Kasta da Anya, which in Chazal is, he obviously was an honor. Afar Kasta da Anya is, the tick of a poor man, a garbage collector, not a garbage collector, a professional, but poor people that have a little bag and they are malaket, leket, shikha, payo. So the Afar Kasta da Anya as a tshuva, Simin Shin Tzadik Zayin, Din Kedima. Who comes first? Yeshnoi echad u'oisik betzorchei tzibur be'emuna ve'echad sheyoshev v'shoicha b'toira b'avoida mimhem koidem lahachzikoi l'cha'ira sheni koidem shu mekudish yoisa omnam mikele melev darishen koidem. It's a very short tshuva. We scroll to the top of the page. The Omer Mazitra le'inyan achyoisoi, Mashiach Malchama, odd if he comes before the Sgan. So, the Kohen Gadol has a Sgan. The Sgan has no function. He is standby. If there will be a psul of the Kohen Gadol, he steps in. Mashiach Malchama doesn't do the avodah. His job is he gives them musar before they go out to wage war, before they go to the battlefield. Who comes first? The Gemara says, Meshuach Melchama. Why? Because Schus HaRabim. So one says, the Sgan comes koidem, because the Sgan does avodah. But the halacha is Meshuach Malchama koidem lezgan, and the Gemara says why? Because he serves the rabbi. Where is that? So the reason the halacha is Meshuach Malchama koidem is lahachyoisoi. Let's have a look at Rashi. Why lahachyoisoi Meshuach Malchama comes first? Who koidem lesgan? Mishum de tzibur tzrichem loy. The Meshuach Malchama, the tzorech Malchama, tvei mesgan. So Rav David Sperber says, the asking comes first. I humbly disagree. You're in a spot from the Zushtel. It's a beautiful Zushtel. It's a spark of genius. But in the din, yes, true. The comparison is faulty. It's not a real comparison. A great Talmud Chacham she'oisik b'tzorech b'toira u'ba'avoda is also Rabbi Tzrichim Loi. His Torah is Megan, his avoda is Megan, he's a role model. And if he's a great Talmud Chacham, probably he teaches Torah as well. So we cannot compare a person that's oisik b'toira avoda to a Sgan, because the Sgan, at least regarding Kohana, is just like any other person. He doesn't is not an avodas English. And you also can't compare the average oisik b'tzarcha tzibur to a Meshuach Melchama. Meshuach Melchama, the entire nation needs him. The people need him. Hatzlacha b'Melchama, siyata d'shmaya is dependent on him. That's not the average oisik b'tzarcha tzibur b'emunah. Halacha l'maisa. I definitely would pass it to the contrary. If you have an asking and you have a great Talmid Chacham, who is not only a great Talmid Chacham, but according to the Lashon of the Tshuva, is oisik b'Torah v'ba'avodah. He's both a Talmid Chacham and a Baal Ma'aser. I definitely would pass him. He comes before the asking. So yes, it's a spark of genius. You know, there's Zushtel to the Gemara Masechet Soito and Rashi on the spot. But as many times, these Zushtelin are not ein behem torah. So today, I think we discussed a very important sugya. Tam tzisadavorim. Talmud Godel shetalmud mevi la'maisa. Rabbi Kiva is right that Talmud Godel le'tarfin is right that Maisa Godel, and it is only the combination of Talmud and Maisa that is the ultimate shlemus of Adam Yisrael. We should all be Baalei Maisa. We should all be Talmidei Chachamim. B'neskeh kulanu b'yachad lahagid al-Torah u'la'adira.
Amen. Kvei HaRav, Yeshakayach. There's someone here who would like to say hello. Rabbi Feldheim, the father of Mr. Horowitz. Let me hear this. Rabbi, you can say hello to the Rav this way.
Yes. Whom am I speaking to?
Here's the mic.
You're muted. You're muted.
Here, go over here. Speak in this mic. Can you hear him?
Hello. You hear me? Yeah, my daughter is from Horowitz.
Who is it?
From Horowitz.
There's an echo. I think you should just unmute and come back to your original. I don't hear you well. Once again. I think I just unmute. Shalom Aleichem. Who am I speaking to?
Okay, try again.
Hello, do you hear me now?
Away. Why is he turning away?
Okay.
Hello?
Oh, my name is Osher Feldheim. Do you hear me now, Levi?
Yeah, I hear you, but I don't see you.
Okay. So my daughter is from Horowitz. She took care of the Rebbe.
Oh, your daughter is such a tzaddik. You know, since she took care of my wife, I make a point, I call her every year before Rosh Hashanah. And your son-in-law, Rabbi Yitzchak, they are such tzaddikim. I have no words to tell you about your children. You know them better than I do. Frumi Horowitz is, what should I tell you, one of the tzaddik ador. And she helped us in our most difficult period in life with all her heart. And she brought so much simcha to my wife when she was ill. So, and Rabbi Yitzchak said Tehillim every day for my wife. He's such a tzaddik. Will you please convey my warmest regards to your daughter and son-in-law?
So the Rav should give a bracha. She has a daughter. She needs a shidduch. Her name is Shendel Bas Frumit Rivka.
I'm writing down the name, and I will daven for Bezrat Hashem constantly. Shendel Bas
Frumit Rivka.
How old is Shendel?
She's 22.
What type of a boy is she looking for?
Ben Torah.
Litvish, Hasidish?
More towards Litvish.
Shendel Bas Frumet Rivka Kodesh Baruch Hu Di Mezamen Zidik Ogam Bekorav. We should share the service. And Rabbi Osher is your name?
My name is Osher Yeshaya Feldheim.
Okay, so when I'll be in America, I'll be happy to see you. I'll be happy to see you. Or when you come to Eretz Yisrael, I'll be happy to see you. And convey my warmest regards to your children.
Thank you so much. It was a beautiful shir. Listen to the shir. Shkoyach.
Kolto.
From Western Heights.
Right. I used to be from Western Heights.
Where do you live here?
I live in I'm in Westgate. My kids are there, so I took an apartment.